and welcome to our weekly craft, a source for ideas, inspiration, and fun for crafters. I'm Sarah White, Chief Maker at ourdailycraft.com, and today I want to talk about sort of the crafting industry and what it takes to make it as a designer, and sort of like a trend, I don't know if you can call it a trend, that I'm seeing of designers who are like taking a step back, either from designing in general or like removing things from their catalogs for various reasons, and like how that happens as a designer. I'm really excited to be wearing a sweater today. It is not really cool enough for that, but I'm doing it anyway. This is my ingenue from Custom Knits, I think is the book that it was in. It's in really old knit picks. It's like a wool, silk, alpaca blend, I think, that I had forever and ever, and finally made this sweater from, and I love it. It's very sweatshirt kind of feel, and it makes me happy. So when I wrote for About.com, which I did for nearly 10 years, I felt a lot of pressure to produce new patterns, which makes sense because, you know, you're trying to get people to visit and to return, and you want people to, you know, have reasons to come visit your site. And while there was a big educational aspect to it, we also wanted to provide patterns for people who are learning to knit or, you know, trying out new skills. So I felt like, and nobody told me this, but it was just a pressure I put on myself, that I needed to have, you know, a new pattern every week or two, because we did need to be producing new content all the time. And so that was one of the things that I really wanted to focus on. But of course that means that, like, over 10 years of doing that, there are a lot of patterns out there that I didn't love. There were things that I made that I didn't want to make, you know, but I needed a pattern for X. You know, I made like a camouflage hat, like a stocking cap for a man, or a large sized head. Those made out of camouflage yarn. You know, that's not a thing that I would ever choose to make on my own, but it was a thing for some reason, I guess. When the camouflage yarn came out, I was like, I need to do something with camouflage yarn. Let's make a hat. You know, and so there's a lot of that. And like, if I had a choice now, I wouldn't make some of those choices that I did. I don't have control over what of those patterns are still available easily on the internet. You know, with the Wayback Machine, you can access most of them, but I wouldn't like share them, a lot of them. Some of them are great, you know, and I did take time to do some good things, some garments and shawls and things that were more not, you know, basic beginner kind of patterns that I'm still proud of and glad that they're out there. And I know that people still use, you know, my basic sock pattern that was on the website. All these years later, there's people are still, you know, learning how to knit socks from that pattern, and that makes me really happy. So I'm, you know, not saying that I'm, you know, unhappy that I did those patterns, but they weren't necessarily always what I wanted to do at the time. And so I can completely empathize with people who are designing and feel like they just have to keep producing, and they have to keep doing, you know, what's popular, what's trendy, you know, because that's what people are looking for. And that's how you make money, is selling patterns, right? So of course you're going to want to make stuff that people want to make and to buy your patterns, but you know, at a certain point you're like, but this is not even anything that I want to do. I'm not enjoying it. I'm just, you know, doing it for the money, for the hope of money. Because once you've made, you know, designed a sweater and had it graded and tech edited or done whatever yourself and testing and all of that stuff, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of effort, and no guarantee at all that you're going to sell enough to make back anything on all of that. So you might as well be enjoying the process of making the stuff, right? So the reason I wanted to talk about this today in particular, because it's been kind of in the air, but I get these Twitter alerts sometimes that are just totally random, like articles and blog posts that people are sharing, and it wasn't even I don't know that it's even somebody I follow on Twitter, but it's Lauren from A Bee in the Bonnet had posted a blog post about how she was taking down some of her old patterns. And one of the reasons was aesthetic, that it was, things she designed early in her career that don't fit in with the things that she's designing now, and that's totally valid. But one of them was a sweater pattern, and she said, I have come to realize that I don't even like knitting garments, let alone designing them. So, I'm not going to ever do that again. And she, in the blog post, she talks about how she was a lawyer and she transitioned from that to design, and that she promised herself when she stopped doing law that she wouldn't do things that she didn't enjoy ever again. And then she did, because she had a sweater pattern, and she, it was not a thing that she enjoyed. It stressed her out to do it. And so that was part of the announcement, was that she was retiring these patterns and not doing garments ever again. Which, I mean, never say never, but that's not going to be a focus of her work, that she likes to do socks, she likes to do shawls and accessories, and not garments, which is totally valid. We as designers need to know what it is we like and what we enjoy doing and what our audience responds to, if we have an audience. And but it really does boil down to, you need to make things because you like to make them, and not because you feel like this pressure to produce a certain thing. So another example of this is Hunter Hammerson from Pantsville Press. She recently went and removed all of her patterns, which was something like more than 300 patterns. She took them all down from Ravelry, and her intent is to she's rebranding and going a whole nother path, but when she brings them back, she's going to have 6 patterns instead of 300 and something patterns that are available, which is a pretty dramatic departure from the norm, I guess, her norm even. And there are a lot of reasons that she decided to do that, and some of it is probably patterns that she didn't like, patterns that just weren't selling. One of the things she had mentioned was that she did ebook collections, and some of them are physical books too, but she had the ebook of patterns, and people would say, oh, why don't you sell these as individual patterns? And so she would, and then no one would buy the individual pattern. And so but it's also just, she's changing her whole business model, and she's doing a Patreon and all that stuff, and that it was just time for her to break from having all of those patterns. And I don't know that it was, that she felt pressured to produce all those things in the past, but she just didn't want to have all that, and the maintenance of all those patterns is a lot if you're selling them yourself, and so it was just time for her to do something different. And that's also valid. The thing is, we as pattern purchasers don't, we're not owed anything by designers. They don't, we shouldn't expect them to produce a certain kind of pattern on a certain schedule, with certain techniques that we like. It's not for them to design for us, right? As a knitter of other people's stuff, maker in general, I sew from other people's patterns, I crochet from other people's patterns, and design things myself. That's really important to me, to not feel like you need to have expectations of a designer in any kind of way, because I don't want to put that on myself as a designer, and I don't want to put that on other people as a consumer of designs. But it's hard. Like, I felt, I know, because I felt that pressure myself to create more, and the variety of things that I wouldn't have done necessarily otherwise. and I wasn't even selling patterns. Like mine were free patterns, but I still felt that pressure to produce. And I imagine that it's so much more now because there are so many more options. There's so many more designers. Um, it's been maybe not 10 years, but pretty close, like 8 years probably since I was doing About. And there's so many more people who are designers. Ravelry's so much bigger, people who sell pay hip and on their own websites and Etsy and everywhere. There's just so many designs. And then you have the social aspect of it, like when I started at About, there was Facebook, Twitter, Instagram was not a thing. Pinterest was barely a thing toward the end of my time there, I think. We were not even, when I first started, we were not encouraged to share on social media. It was totally a Google game. Like we did SEO and people searched and found us, and we had, about.com in general, but the knitting website in particular, was top ranked in search engines for, lots of content. And some of my pages even still, they still have my name on them, even though I haven't touched them. They have access to edit them. But some of my pages still rank on the front page of Google, even though, they're decades old now. But social being such a big thing now, you probably have that in your mind, right? That you're thinking, okay, I want this to make a splash on Instagram. I want people to be sharing it. I want it, people to want to buy it. I mean, that's always, of course, that was always the case, that you wanted people to buy it. But the way that you get attention for things is different. You have to share a million photos on Instagram. You have to do the reels, and I think that's why part of why test knitting has become such a big thing is that because you need people to be talking about your pattern, and you need to be, you need those pictures to share different looks and different sizes and how your pattern looks on different bodies if you're doing garments. And it's just a completely different thing. And the algorithm of Instagram is such that you have to consistently produce content, and so if you're not consistently making new patterns, what are you sharing? And so I get how that is a really important and hard thing, and I kind of am secretly glad that I'm not like that I didn't get known as a designer. Like I have patterns that are for sale, but I don't, I have 1,500 followers on Instagram. I'm not doing like big splashy pattern releases. I do stuff when I feel like it, I don't feel any pressure because I'm not making any money. My last pattern I made like $15 or something, and that's fine because I made it for fun, and it was like a Bernie Sanders inauguration mitten cowl, and that tells you how long it's been since I've done a design, because it was right after the inauguration, so it's been almost 2 years since I released a design for paid. I do free patterns all the time, not all the time, but regularly. But and I think that that's in general, more generally, it's the danger of making something you love into your job, right? Because I feel like I don't have that pressure because it's not a big source of income for me, so I can just do it for fun. And if I want to try and sell something, I can, and if I don't, I can just put it for free on my website, and then I'm at least getting advertising traffic and things like that. So that's fine. It's not a huge ad income on my blog. It's not a huge source of income either, but I feel like I can do that it still feels like a hobby a little bit, and not like I'm feeding my kid from pattern sales. So I get that tug that like, this is my job. I have to do, release X number of patterns, and I need these number of sales, and I've got to keep hustling to get that. But that just sounds terrible. Like, and I felt that at About too, that it was just like, this is not really fun anymore. And I loved working for About and was sad when it ended, but I probably wouldn't still be doing it if I hadn't. I got fired. It's a long story. Like, they were revamping everything and let a lot of people go en masse one day, and I got caught up in that. But that's a story for another day. But I don't know if now, after 15 or 18 years of that, if I would still be doing it. And I would probably feel differently about it. My approach to doing patterns for them probably would have changed by now. So I don't know if I would still want to do it, but I have this seesawing in my brain and in my heart about, I really feel like my purpose is about encouraging creativity in other people and living a creative life myself, to like show as an example to people that, the importance of creativity and doing things every day that make you happy. And if that's just a tiny corner of your life, then that's great. It's better than no corner of your life, right? So there's an extent to which I'm like, I need to have more work that encourages that, or that builds off of that idea that I'm trying to encourage other people to create. And so, I love all those little pieces that I've got, whether it's patterns for my blog or instructional stuff for my blog or writing posts for other people, or all the different things that I do that can tie into creativity there. But then I worry that, like, when it becomes too much and creativity is your job, it's a slippery slope to it not being fun anymore. And so every time I'm like, oh, I want to go all in on creative stuff, and I do, but then I'm also like, but I've got to be really careful to make sure that it stays fun. And so, that's a balance that I'm sure not every knitwear designer is able to have, if that's really your income for your life and your supporting your family with pattern sales and things like that. It's got to be really hard. And burnout is real, and there's all the time people that you're like, oh, I wonder whatever happened to that designer. Like, I've got their book on my shelf, and I love their stuff, and I haven't heard anything from them for years. And you'll find, if you go search, and then it's like, oh, they're not designing anymore because they got burned out on it, or they weren't making sales, or they they had to go get a real job or whatever. And so that's very real, and it'll be interesting for me to see, who in the current wave of, and I feel like there are fewer of those like big name designers than there used to be, and part of that's the book industry changing, that, and with COVID times there's fewer teachers, right, because there are fewer events for people to teach at. But it'll be interesting to see how that continues, and if more of, if it becomes a trend that more of the people who are designing now are starting to get that burned out feeling. And I don't know how long it takes, is it 10 years? Is it longer? Is it less? Depends probably on the volume of patterns you're doing and how they're selling and all of that too. But, I just wonder, like, I worry about people who design full-time, and like how sustainable that is, that you continue to love it. And I'm sure that there are people who only design for themselves and happen to have caught a groove where they have fans and people who buy their patterns who love what they do, and they love what they do, and kudos to them, because that's hard to find that intersection of what you love and what is commercially viable. So I didn't have that, and I'm okay with that. But it's just something that, and I don't know how this is a valuable lesson for people who aren't professional designers, but maybe it's just giving designers grace to make their own decisions about what they're making, when they're releasing patterns, how they're released, and whether they continue to design or continue to provide access to patterns of theirs from the past. I think it's important to give people warning, and these two examples that I just mentioned did that. They were like, these patterns are going away. I'm having a sale on these patterns. Please go buy these patterns if you want them, because they are not coming back. And that's important to like be really transparent about why you're changing things and what's going away and how they can access that and the time frame that is allowable for you that you're comfortable with retiring those things. But yeah, it's just, I guess it's another, we're all human and people can change their minds about things, and we as the consumers need to be okay with that and understanding of that. And it's hard to be a designer full time and like balance what you like to do and what is commercially successful. And I don't know that I could do it. And so kudos to everybody who makes it work. So yeah, that's what's on my mind today. I just started watching McCartney 321 on Hulu, which is really music geeky, into the process of making songs and some of the inspirations behind some of the songs. It's the Beatles and Wings and all of that. But I think I decided my genre for visual consumption, movies, TV, whatever, is people who geek out about something. And like that's the creative thing again, right? Because I don't listen to a lot of music, but I love music documentaries because of that, where people get really excited about the thing that they're really excited about and talk about their creative process and things like that. Just like really is cool to me and inspiring, because to think about Paul McCartney just like messing around on the piano. And I like food documentaries for the same reason. I'm not a big foodie, but I like to see people who are passionate about stuff talking about the stuff they're passionate about. So if you have any suggestions for me of documentaries, movies, shows that are, it doesn't have to be real life, but that are stories about creativity, about people who are really passionate about stuff. I mean, like I even like, sciencey stuff. It doesn't have to be creative traditionally, like the arts. I just really have an interest in like what people get excited about and them talking about the things that excite them and that they are able to geek out about. And it's really cool to me. It's my favorite. So anyway, that is that. Reading, I read a lot last weekend because I had a whole bunch of ebooks come in from the library at once. I was doing Obama reading list, so I read Velvet Was the Night, which is like a Mexican noir mystery, which was pretty fun. And then I read The Guncle, which, do not judge the book by the cover because it looks like a beach read, and it is not. It is very sad and sweet and a lovely story about the gay uncle of these children's mother, who the Guncle was friends with in college, and she ended up marrying his brother, but she dies of cancer, and the husband is a drug addict, and so he checks himself into rehab and gives the Guncle the kids for the summer while he's in rehab, and their mother has just died. And so it seems from the cover like it's going to be this zany, silly kind of story, and it's not, but it's very sweet, and it's good, and I was glad that I read it. I'm now reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is about the lifelong friendship between two video game designers. They meet it's man and a woman, and they meet as children when he was in a car accident and his foot was completely shattered, and so he has to have all these surgeries on his foot, and her sister has cancer as a child and is in treatment, and so she's in the hospital a fair bit, and so they become friends in the game room, so they play video games together. And then it's about, and they go off to college and they make a game together, and it's, you know, a hit. And then what happens through their careers as they make games and try to be friends with each other, which is hard at times for them. So that one is enjoyable, and you know, it's not too video game geekery if you're not into that, which I'm not really, but again, it's about the creative process and how things are made and things in a way that I enjoy that as well. So yeah, and I just started the other couple weeks ago. I was ripping out this yarn from this blanket, and I just started again on long, bigger needles. So this is probably what I'm working on this weekend. I just finished my sea glass, but I haven't woven in the ends yet or blocked it, which it needs. So maybe next week I'll be able to show you that one finished. I need to start on re-knitting the top of my shoe, but because it's like a Henley, the top is it's kind of complicated. Like, it needs focus. It's not hard, but it's just a lot of, you're increasing in different places, and it's worked back and forth, and there's short rows, and there's a lot going on at the beginning of that pattern. So I need to like steel myself for doing it again, but I want that sweater for the fall, so I will make myself do it at some point. That is all for me for this week. I hope that you have a crafty weekend whenever you watch this, and I would love to hear what you're making, watching, reading, listening to. If you have suggestions for like geekery content, I would love to hear that as well. And if you have thoughts about like what it is to be a professional designer and how to deal with that balance of commerce and fun and creating what you want to create, I'd love to hear about that too, because I totally have not figured it out, and that is why I am poor. No. So I have never made money from directly selling patterns, because I'm not good at any of that. So anyway, I hope that you have a good crafty week, and I will see you again soon.